I'm Jason Wright, and this is the Texas Titans Podcast. Just like the name of the podcast suggests, I will be visiting with Texas Titans of business, academia, sports, or whatever their chosen field, looking for the disciplines and habits that have made these Texans so remarkable. Success leaves clues, and I want to crack the code to these Titans' success and share it with you. Thank you for joining me here on the Texas Titans Podcast. Welcome to the Texas Titans Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Wright. Last week, I sat down with a true power player amongst the Dallas entrepreneurial scene. Trey Bowles has quickly become Mr. Entrepreneur in the Dallas area. Having successfully scaled and exited his own enterprises, Trey now, in addition to his own ventures, helps groom and mentor other entrepreneurs. As you will find out in this interview, Trey not only cares about starting businesses, he cares about making Dallas a better place to live and work. It's this desire that has made him such a staple in the Dallas community, even to the point Mayor Mike Rawlings has looked to Trey as a trusted advisor. This was a great visit, and I have no doubt you'll enjoy getting to know Trey Bowles on this episode of the Texas Titans Podcast. Now, before we get into the interview, I want to give you Trey's bio because it's quite extensive and it's pretty remarkable. First of all, Trey Bowles is a serial entrepreneur, social capitalist, and educator. Trey co-founded the Dallas Entrepreneur Center, the DEC as it's known, a central location for entrepreneurs to learn how to start, build, and grow businesses through training, education, mentorship, promotion, and capital investment. As a co-founder and CEO, Trey leads strategy, vision, and drives the overall planning and development efforts for the DEC. Bowles also recently co-founded and launched the Dallas Innovation Alliance, the DIA, a public-private partnership dedicated to the design, development, and execution of a smart cities plan for Dallas. Now, I want to make a little bit of an alteration there. Trey has since stepped down as the CEO of the DEC, and now he is just the chairman. So I want to make sure we get that accurate. In addition to his work with the DEC, Trey worked closely with Startup America Partnership, a nonprofit organization started by Steve Case. He was the founder of AOL, for those of you who don't know, and the Kauffman Foundation, leading a team of entrepreneurial experts across the country to help high-growth startups find greater success. Trey also helped launch the Arts Entrepreneurship Department in the Meadows School of the Arts at Southern Methodist University and currently serves as an adjunct professor on staff teaching social entrepreneurship and an Accelerate Your Startup class. Bowles also co-founded the Mayor's Star Council with Mayor Mike Rawlings of Dallas to find a culturally diverse and civically minded group of emerging leaders who want to embrace and engage the city of Dallas as opposed to inheriting the city in 20 years. Trey has built companies in both the for-profit and nonprofit space with an expertise in strategy, operations, and marketing. Bowles has held key leadership roles in the industries of music, entertainment, and disruptive technology, including running the popular peer-to-peer file sharing site Morpheus, which we will discuss in the podcast at length. He led the turnaround and sale of Big Jump Media Incorporated to Salem Communications in 2010. Trey lives in Dallas with his wife and 3 children and is committed to building collaborative ecosystems at the intersection of technology, entrepreneurship, and education. That's a mouthful, and you will find out why that bio is so extensive during this interview with one of the most impressive guys I've had the pleasure of meeting and interviewing, Trey Bowles. So please enjoy it here on the Texas Titans Podcast. This episode of the Texas Titans Podcast is brought to you by Hot Tots, Hautetotz, Hot Tots in La Piazza Shopping Center on Old Bullard Road in Tyler, Texas. At Hot Tots, they have such wonderful brands as Tea Collection, Buford Bonnet, and many others. They have an incredible toy section which features Melissa and Doug, Lego, and coming shortly, Nerf. So if you need toys, if you need baby gifts, if you're expecting, whatever you need for your newborn through preteens, Hot Tots is the place for you. You can visit Hot Tots online at hottots, where you can shop online, or you can stop by at 4855 Old Bullard Road, Suite 103, right behind Broadway Square Mall. Hot Tots is the absolute most incredible place for your newborn, your preteen, and anything in between. Please visit Hot Tots, one of my favorite sponsors ever. All right, Trey Bowles, thanks so much for sitting down with me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, glad to be here.
All right, well, I'm going to read one of the many bios that's floating around out there for you. You know, you're one of these guys that's done a lot of things over the course of your life, and this is just one that I found. It's a little shorter than the LinkedIn version, so
good. Short is better.
Okay, so Trey Bowles is a serial entrepreneur, social capitalist, and educator. He co-founded the Dallas Entrepreneur Center, the DEC, a central location for entrepreneurs to learn how to start, build, and grow businesses through training, education, mentorship, promotion, and capital investment. Under his leadership, the DEC launched a public-private partnership called the Dallas Innovation Alliance to help design, develop, and launch a smart city solution in Dallas. In an effort to get more young professionals engaged in the city of Dallas, Bowles co-founded the Mayor Star Council with Dallas Mayor Mike Rawlings to find culturally diverse and civically minded emerging leaders that wanted to embrace and engage the city today rather than just inherit it in 20 years. Trey also serves as an adjunct professor at Southern Methodist University, where I'm an alum, so God bless you for that, my brother, pony up, where he built and launched an entrepreneurship program in the Arts, Entrepreneurship, and Arts Management Department in the Meadows School of the Arts. Wow. That's a lot, man. You've been busy.
That one's short. I like that one.
Yeah, it's busy. So, all right. So, first of all, tell me where you're from. Where were you raised? How did you get to Dallas? Have you always been in Dallas? Let's just start right there. Give me the young Trey Bowles. And here's what I want to know. I want a couple things. Where you're from, kind of a little bit of background on how, as in your adolescent years, how that shaped you into the executive entrepreneur, startup, serial entrepreneur that you are. And then I want to know the very first thing you ever got paid to do. So, go.
Okay. So I'm from Dallas, Texas. I grew up in Preston Hollow. Okay. Grew up going from kindergarten to senior year to Trinity Christian Academy in Addison. And then went off to play football at a small school in Alabama called Samford. Yeah, got hurt, finished at Baylor.
Okay.
So I did not always know I was an entrepreneur. It wasn't until I started my third company that I thought, hey, I may be an entrepreneur. Right. And so growing up, the first thing I ever made money doing was probably mowing somebody's lawn. But it was also the greatest lesson I ever had. I had a young friend. When I was young, I had a friend, and her dad said, I'll let you mow my lawn. And so I went out and I mowed it, and just knocked it out. Probably took 20 minutes. Came in, and unbeknownst to him, I was in a room and overheard a conversation with him and his wife. And he said, man, I love Trey. I just think he's so great, but he's just not a very hard worker. He just didn't do a very good job on the lawn. I'm not going to hire him to do it again.
Wow.
That changed everything.
Yeah.
Ever since then, everything I've ever done, I overcommitted what I needed to do to accomplish what I had been asked to do. And that is why I'm an entrepreneur. I probably have an addictive personality a little bit too, because I think for some people, entrepreneurship is an addiction.
Right.
But most importantly, I just love building things and creating visions and ideas of things I want to accomplish, and know that the ability to get that done or not get done lays 100% on my shoulders.
Right.
And because of that, I enjoy the lifestyle that comes with being an entrepreneur, which sometimes is awesome. Most of the time is just really, really hard.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that. Okay, so my first quote-unquote real entrepreneurial experience also was mowing yards, and I had a very similar circumstance happen. So one of my uncles was going to let me cut his grass. And he had a huge yard. And in the backyard, he had like a workshop, and there was a patch of grass behind me. So I'm mowing this thing, and it's taking all day. I'm exhausted at the time. I don't know, I was probably like 12, whatever. I decide not to mow the patch of grass behind. Now,
it's like a little soul patch, right?
Oh, it was. It's like a little soul patch. Nobody's going to notice. It's just, leave it, no big deal. My uncle calls me, literally within probably 30, 40 minutes of me completing the yard. He said, hey, you forgot something, didn't you? And I said, no, sir, I don't think so. He said, yeah, you didn't mow behind my workshop. Now, here's what I failed to comprehend at that young age. First of all, my uncle, who was the youngest of 3 sons, one of which was my uncle who had died in the Battle of the Bulge in World War II, grew up in Brashear, Texas as sharecrop farmers. My grandfather became the head of the household at age 11 after their father died, and he was the youngest, and so he grew up right in the middle of the Great Depression. His brother goes off to war. His father died young, and he had worked his tail off, and he was an incredible entrepreneur himself. Mm-hmm. And so it was kind of the same thing. Once that happened to me, it taught me a very valuable lesson that do all the work. Mm-hmm. So I can totally relate to that. So you cut grass. Now you're realizing, okay, never again will anyone say that Trey does a less than stellar job. So where do you go from there?
So I went, on to, as I said, I played sports in high school, went and played football in college, and was real committed to that. And then after I moved back to Texas and finished up at Baylor, I had a friend who started a company during the dot-com boom, and he called and said, I need you to do some work. And I said, okay. And so I started doing some work for him, and I started to learn. And then I saw opportunities within that business. And I said, well, you have this part of your business that's working. What if you started something like that? And he said, well, you go do that. It's all inside the business. And so I started putting things together. I had learned in college, my first real entrepreneurial initiative was I had a band that I wanted to come play at our school. And so I went to the school and said, how do you book bands and what's that process? And so I called the band and said, we're going to pay you. Will you come do this? And I'm going to promote it, and I'm going to get a bunch of people there. And that's all I knew. I said, can I take your CD and make cassettes out of it and give it to my friends? They said, sure. And so I spent about 100 hours working on that, promoting, doing all that stuff. They came in town. They had the show, packed out, a building. Then I took them to dinner, bought them dinner, took them back to put them on their tour bus. And as they're driving away, and I'm sort of waving, I think, oh my gosh, I spent, $75 of my money, which at that time was a ton of money to me, and we'd done all this stuff, and all because I just wanted to have this connection to this band, and I wanted people to feel as passionate about this band as I was. Mm-hmm. I said, I bet I can get chumps all over the U.S. to do this for free. And so that's how I started getting into entrepreneurship and promoting bands. And my first initiative for this other company was building and creating a nationwide tour for several artists, and so that's where I started. That company went on to get bought in the first 8 months by Gaylord Entertainment, okay. And we all moved to Nashville. Okay. We were there for a year, and that was when the dot-com busted. Right. But we were doing some really interesting things. We were doing things back then that nobody was doing except for maybe Amazon. We were building front-end websites with back-end fulfillment capabilities and e-commerce capabilities, and then a fulfillment center with all the necessary hardware to build and launch and grow your business. And through a series of a bunch of different, things, I was asked to run that project. So that's how I learned about technology and how to make those whole things work. Fast forward, we find out they're going to shut the company down, this division. So this division of Gaylord had 26 disparate business units. All of the tech and all of the internet strategy went through our company. And so the internet busted. Oh my gosh, the internet was a fad. Why'd we do this? Let's get out. So we go in one day, 150 people in the newly launched 65,000 square foot fulfillment center, get told, you have no jobs, the company's shutting down. Wow. And I was the only person they kept, and they brought me inside and they said, look, you're not going to get let go today. Your job is to liquidate the assets of the business. This is what we're going to pay you. This is how long you have to do it. Do you want this job? I said, absolutely, I'll take it. This horrible day happens. I get in the car, I'm driving on the way home, I call my dad. Hey Dad, horrible thing happened, but I got kept on, and they've hired me to liquidate the assets of this business. and I get paid this much money to do it and commission. And he said, son, that's great. And I said, I just have one question. He said, yeah. I said, what does liquidate assets mean? I had no clue. What it really meant was we had a couple of businesses we needed to sell, and we needed a lot of stickers to put on chairs that we would go out and sell. But so that was my first, foray into okay, now what am I going to do? I have no job. I'm a kid. I'm 21, 22 years old. I started a consulting firm to help companies mitigate this new online space. Because back then, people didn't have a website. And if they did, their website was one business. Their offline or brick and mortar was a separate business. They weren't integrated.
Right.
And so we helped them do that. And during that process, I got a client who was building a peer-to-peer file sharing company. So many people remember the concept of Napster. Sure. And so I came on and they said, essentially, we need your help to build this company and grow it. And I said, okay, great. Give me 2 weeks. They wanted me to build an online advertising platform and plan. So I said, all right, can I have 2 weeks? Sure. So the first week I went and researched online advertising and how it worked. And the second week I wrote the plan. The third week I'm running this organization as it relates to that. The interesting thing that sort of plays into that story and makes this story really interesting is that a week before we launched this company, which was called Morpheus, Napster was shut down by the government. And so what Napster had done was build an awareness of this new market, this peer-to-peer file sharing market. And then their only source for doing that goes away. And then a company opens and launches the next week called Morpheus, which was not long after The Matrix came out, and it just exploded. We had 110 million customers in the first 11 months, and was the fastest growing company in the history of the internet to this date. I mean, it just exploded. And so it was literally like lassoing a wave. That's how we figure out. My first staff setup was I had 3 college kids and a high school kid.
Right.
And they were our salespeople. And they said, well, people are asking me what my title is. People are asking. I said, well, who are you talking to? Yeah. Well, I'm talking to the head of North American sales for Coke. Okay, well, you're the head of North American sales for Morpheus. Right. And some person, I'm talking to junior marketing associate at this agent. Say you're an account man. I said, I don't care what title you use. Just sell the deal. Right. Get the deal done. And so over that summer, we started generating hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars a month in revenue. End of the summer, the team comes to me and says, hey, we're leaving. And I'm like, what did I do? Why are you leaving? They said, well, school starts on Monday and and I was like, oh my gosh. So at that point, I've got to hire a sales team. I go out, I buy a book on sales, read it, and that's how we develop our sales strategy. And so it grew from there, and it was just an amazing experience I'll never run a company that was that big and that ubiquitous ever again. From the time I stepped off a plane in London and got in a black cab, and a cab driver asked me if I had heard of Morpheus, and I was in Little Rock, Arkansas, or Hot Springs, Arkansas, in a Walmart, and 2 people in front of me were talking about Morpheus. I'll never have a company that's that big again, but just learned a ton. Yeah. Trial by fire kind of thing.
Well, you said a couple things there that I think are really important to kind of delve into a little bit, because one of the things that I do as well is I try to mentor young entrepreneurs, undergrads that they have these grand visions of, I want to own my own business. Right. You ask them why, and they start talking money. Right. And I tell them, recently I was a student at Boston State University sitting on an entrepreneurship panel, and a student asks me, you guys are talking about these big exits, hundreds of millions of dollars, how do you get it to where something sells for 20, 30, 40, 100, $200 million? She's all, focused, and she even asked the question, if I want to start a company and sell it for $100 million, what do I do? And my answer to her was, don't start the company because you're going to fail miserably if that's your approach. I'm all about keeping an exit strategy in mind, right, especially if you're acquiring, which is a completely different strategy. But generally speaking, a startup is a passion that becomes monetizable, and all of a sudden you look up, if you love what you're doing and you've got a viable product and a market is responding, then people start asking, offering you a lot of money. But if you look for that at the beginning, I think you fail. So that's just one of the many mistakes I see these young wannabe entrepreneurs make. Another though, and like in my opinion, someone who I bought my first company when I was 28, worked for my first startup when I was like 26, and my biggest failure or biggest weakness was I refused to ask questions, no matter how simple, because I didn't want people to think I was stupid. I didn't want people to think I didn't know what I was doing.
Right.
I didn't want them to think they had made a mistake by putting me in the role I was in, because one of the things that you probably saw back in those days, which you're a couple years younger than me. You're what, 42 maybe?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm 44. So we used to be those guys that are the youngest guys in the room, or the young guy doing things that generally older guys do. Now we're just doing the stuff we're supposed to be doing because we're in our 40s, right?
Right. It's not as impressive.
It's not as impressive. And so for me back then, it was always not wanting people to think that due to my age, I didn't know what the heck I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
You called your dad and asked him a very basic question, which I commend. So tell me, as you were going through that process, you read the sales book. I thought that was pretty awesome, because the first time I ever had to analyze data, do you remember those old commercials? It was an infomercial, the guy from Minnesota that was bald with a mustache selling the My Computer classes on how to do Excel.
Right.
Okay, I get my first project to analyze a bunch of data. I pick up the phone and I call and I order those my PC or whatever it was called, My Computer Coach, whatever that was. Take me through, what was it? Did you always do that? Did you just have an intuition that it's okay to ask questions because that's highly commendable? Or were there times whenever you wish you had asked questions because it would have saved a lot of time, money, effort?
Sure. So I think I made a lot of mistakes, but they stemmed from two major issues. One was at that time I didn't want to appear that I wasn't ready for the position that I was in.
Yep.
I was acting as if, right? I was fake it till you make it. And so, sure, I spent time doing things that I didn't need to. I mean, I remember buying a pair of glasses because I thought they would make me look older, right? Any way that I could, because I remember I would have phone calls with people and do deals on the phone, and everything was fine. I'd meet them in person, they'd treat me different.
Yep.
Right. So that was a problem. The other thing was, and I see this in young entrepreneurs all the time, is I just thought I knew way more than I did. I left, when I left Morpheus, it was the fastest growing company in the history of the internet. We had 100 million customers, all this stuff. And I thought, like, oh, well, I'll just go. I was going to be the head of internet for MTV. That's what I wanted to do. I had a meeting with Apple. They said, we're launching this new product called iTunes. We think you could be really helpful. We'll bring you in into director level. My response was, why would I start at a director level? Like, I just ran this company. Maybe I shouldn't run it, but director seems low. Well, I didn't understand. Corporations are bigger entities. Director level of corporation was a really good deal. And then I was offered to probably the biggest pass that I've ever made, which I don't look back at any decision I make and say, oh my gosh, I ruined my life, I didn't pick this. But I remember after I left Morpheus, I was walking around Europe for about 4 months, just took some time off, met with some guys we'd worked with. They were starting a company. They told me what the company idea was. They told me I was working. They said, we want you to be our U.S. partner and launch this in the U.S. And I said, you have 3 problems. I said, 1, the name's horrible. 2, it's going to take 3 years before anybody uses this type of technology. Mm-hmm. And 3, I think you're going to get sued because people are going to use this to steal music, and you're going to have the same problem. So the funny thing was, all 3 of those things I said were accurate. Mm-hmm. The name was bad. Mm-hmm. The company took 3 years before anybody started leveraging that type of technology, and they got sued, and they dealt with it. Well, that company since then sold for $3 billion to eBay. Wow. Then a couple of years later for $1 billion to a private equity firm, and then in 2014 sold for $10.5 billion to Microsoft, and it was Skype. So you look at that, the whole reason I made the decision I did was I thought 3 years was a long time. Yep. My first company I worked for sold for a bunch of money in 8 months. Mm-hmm. The second company, the first company I really built and kind of ran, was the fastest growing in the internet. I didn't know what I didn't know. Yeah. Right? So you could call it, I used to call it ignorant arrogance. Like, would I have been as arrogant as I was had I known more? Absolutely not. Would I still been arrogant? Probably so. But those were the two biggest mistakes I made, was not asking questions and admitting things, and not recognizing that I didn't know as much as I thought. And so the freedom that we have as entrepreneurs today, though, is that we don't have the time or money to pretend like we know stuff.
That's right.
And so the easiest thing in the world is to ask questions. I don't understand that. Will you explain that to me? I don't get that. Because everybody thinks that at times. The difference is, I don't care whether you think I'm smart or you think I'm dumb or you think I'm great or not. What I care about is executing my plan. And if I can do that, then I'm going to be happy. And that's not determined by how much money I make on it or how big the deal is. This is what I set out to do.
Right.
Did I do it or did I not?
Right.
And so for me today, the thing I would encourage entrepreneurs to do a lot is, don't be afraid to ask questions. Surround yourself with people that know a lot more than you, and listen to them.
Yeah.
And if you do that, you're going to save yourself a lot of time and a lot of money. And in some cases, you're going to be able to launch a company that you never would have been able to launch had you not listened. And there's people, like you said, you mentor entrepreneurs. There's people out there who have experience that are willing to tell you for free.
Yeah.
Listen to that.
Yeah.
Take that. Garner that. We had one of my companies, the chairman of Wells Fargo, was on my board. He knew absolutely nothing about the technology that our company used. But every time he opened his mouth, I just started taking notes, because I knew there was something that was going to be in there about business, about finances, about banking, about something that I was going to pull out, and it was going to be like, how much would it have cost for me to pay that guy to give me advice? Exactly. He's giving it for free. So take something from everything.
Well, and one of my favorite stories, back whenever Henry Ford was, he had come of age. He was, if not the wealthiest man in America, close to it at the time. And the government had come after him and put him on trial. Not trial, it was a hearing, I suppose. And to show that, to try to prove his lack of sophistication, this attorney starts asking him all these questions about history, world history, and events, and this, that, and the other. To which Ford's like, I don't know. And then finally he says, sir, he said, why would I waste my time, I'm paraphrasing here, why would I waste my time knowing such things whenever I have a staff of professionals that I can push a button and ask any of your questions and have answered within seconds? Why would I waste my time knowing? And then, of course, there's whether, I don't even know if this is true or not, but supposedly Einstein couldn't even remember his own phone number,
right?
Or his address, and I think, I think if young entrepreneurs, and I think even older, I don't care, if people would realize there's an answer somewhere, and to your point, yeah, people love to let you know what they know, and I mean that's one of the things I thoroughly enjoy now. I mean, having made all those mistakes, I love to be able to tell these young people, hey, don't do that. When you can afford it, find a good lawyer, find a good CPA. All those things that are kind of cliche, no, they're true. Go find them. Another thing you touched on too, because I had a big problem with this, was the patience aspect. When you're in your 20s, 30s looks old.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, whenever you get 40, 30s looks like a baby. So you're like, oh my gosh, if only I could have those 30s back, right?
Right.
And you start to get more of a sense of, this is a long time we really have. I mean, yes, life is that quick. It's a vapor. But as it relates to getting things done that really matter, you got time. Gary Vaynerchuk, who is one of my favorite entrepreneurs to listen to, and who imparts a lot of wisdom, this is his thing. So if you've got patience, then you're ahead of the game. And so I think that's something that anyone can take from what you said. It's like, just be patient and ask the questions. I always, folks ask me, was it worth it to go to graduate school and get my MBA from SMU? And just let me say, I'm a big fan of SMU. I think it's an incredible institution. I know you're an adjunct professor there. We both have an affinity for SMU. That said, the technical components, I've been an entrepreneur for almost a decade whenever I went back to get my MBA. So I think I had probably learned more just by trial and error. However, the thing that I did learn was to ask really good questions about things I had no idea about. Weighted average cost of capital, hurdle rates, assessing risk. And it took me, I'm almost embarrassed to say, it took me that long to be willing to ask those questions, because I'm looking around the room at all these very bright people, and they're willing to ask the questions.
Mm-hmm.
So you exit Morpheus, you're hanging out in Europe for a few months, just kind of deciding what the next move is. Then what happens?
So I came back to the States, decided that I wanted to live in New York City. Mm-hmm. So I moved to New York City. And then I helped start a company there that was based around the most sophisticated lie detection technology ever created out of Israel. And my job was it did a lot of counter-terrorism related stuff and things like that the government weren't interested. I said I want to have absolutely nothing to do with that. But the way that the technology worked, it was called layer voice analysis, and it analyzed 129 different parameters of voice. So it wasn't like a lie detector or polygraph where you put it on and it tracks your pulse and tells you whether you're lying or not. This was a technology that was based on the frequency of which your vocal cords were activated. And so 16 of those 129 different parameters were related to attraction and arousal. And so we created something called the love detector. And so literally the way it worked is you'd pick up your cell phone, you'd have a conversation with somebody about anything, and then it would send you a text message and say, this person is attracted to you or not, and it was a little thing, and it was really funny. Well, back then, they didn't have apps. So if you wanted an app installed on the phone, it had to be done at the manufacturer level. And so we went around and we did deals with all the major telephone companies around the world, from Orange to BT to Telefonica to T-Mobile and AT&T and all the ones in the States and a bunch of different areas who all said, we love this, we'll do it. And then to help build awareness of the technology and how it was going to work, I started writing reality television shows on MTV. Because it was complicated technology, it was difficult to explain to somebody how it worked. But if we could demonstrate it in like a real world entertainment setting, it would work. So we did that for a while, and that was just really interesting, and I had a lot of fun doing that. And then that one went south when the person who owned the North American rights to the technology started demanding huge upfront licensing fees from all these companies who were saying, wait a second, you convinced us to let you put this on our phones. Like, you should be really happy. We're not paying you anything for it, right? And you're going to have to manage the app on the phone and interactivity between that. All has to happen on your servers. And so the person who had the rights to it decided to make those decisions. He decided to tell a couple of pretty high level entertainment execs that he wanted X amount of dollars up front for these television shows. And at that point I sort of said, look, you want to sell me the rights? He didn't want to sell me the rights. So I said, okay, well, so I came back to Dallas, and then here helped build an entertainment company that was focused around investments from Radio Shack, Dish, and Sirius Satellite. This is back when Starbucks got involved in the specialty retail side of things, the CDs in stores. We did that in Radio Shack, 7-Eleven, Pier 1 and Bombay Company. And then we had a television network we were building on Dish, and we had a record label piece that we were building as well. So when I lived in Nashville, I was building Morpheus. I got into the music business because all my friends were musicians. Right. So I also launched a music management company with some friends because I wanted to help my buddies be successful, and they just didn't have the business side of it. And so we had done that on the side. And so I've always done like multiple things. Part of the benefit of being an entrepreneur is that nobody can tell you where you need to be and when you need to be there and what you need to do. And so I've always just found things that I was passionate about, and then I went out and figured out how to do them. Yeah. Teaching, building an entrepreneurship department in SMU was one of them, which was I never saw it as a character flaw that I didn't know how to do something. And I think so often that's the way people think about being an entrepreneur, because entrepreneurs come in and they have a certain level of expertise in one area and they don't know any of the rest of that stuff. Right. And I tell them all the time. My wife, who is a newly minted entrepreneur, I said, look, it's not a character flaw that you don't know how to do this. Absolutely. Doesn't make you a less person, doesn't make you stupid. It is reality, right? And if you look at it like that and surround yourselves with people that can do the things that you're not good at. The way I tell entrepreneurs every day, it's one of my favorite bits of advice, is if you are the if you are the best at more than one thing in your company, you've hired poorly. So if you're the best marketer and the best finance person, you hired poorly. If you were the best at nothing in your company, you hired brilliantly. Because you know what? Why wouldn't you put the best players on the field at any given time? It doesn't matter who runs the company, it matters who owns the company. And so I have friends who are CEOs that say, every day I go to work all day long and I try to find somebody better than me to run my own company. Because if I do that, I'm more successful. My vision is accomplished more. I'm able to be more successful. I'm able to reach more people and create an impact. The problem is we so often think, the question we ask, the question I was always asked was, do you want to be, you play football, you want to be the guy that gets the ball at the end of the game, right? And that's a great question. Do you have the confidence? Do you want to contribute? Do you feel like you have the ability? Those are good components. My question was always, am I open? If I'm open, heck yeah, throw me the ball. If I'm not open, somebody else is. So as much as I'd love to be the guy that catches the game-winning touchdown, I want to be the guy that's a part of the team that builds the best plan for success. And that's where young entrepreneurs get it wrong, because they believe, and we've talked about this before earlier, we had to prove ourselves, we had to prove ourselves, we had to prove ourselves. And we did. But when you look at the problem with a different solution, which is the goal is to create the biggest impact, to create the biggest shareholder value, in a nonprofit, to reach and serve and support the most people. Those are your goals. Why wouldn't you go find people way better than you to make that happen? And there's a certain amount of weird ego and confidence and even, that goes towards being a good entrepreneur, but that doesn't mean you have to be stupid about it. And so I think that's a thing that I try to tell entrepreneurs all the time, and I try to remember myself, is what am I really good at? I need to do those things, and what do I think needs to be done to make my company successful? And if I can't match up teams that put together those skill sets, then I'm not doing my best to build a company that's going to be successful.
I think that is so much wisdom in all of that. And like you go back to one of the things I think that you did much better than me in the early days. So like you said, you don't have to know a lot. I mean, for instance, like my first business I ever purchased was a real estate firm, and it was residential real estate firm. It's a Century 21 franchise. I had never sold a house in my life. I didn't even have a real estate license, and went through the process, bought it. The problem was that I had the vision for being an entrepreneur. I knew that's what I was destined to be. That whole patience thing. I was working at the Home Depot in a leadership program. If I just kept my nose clean, I would have been very high up in the Home Depot, kind of like your scenario with Apple. I would have been high up, probably to the executive VP, guru, president of some division or whatever. But I was like, I'm not waiting that long to be the CEO. Right. I'd rather just go scrape together some money and buy myself the title. But the thing I didn't do, though, and it sounds like something you did, because this whole entertainment piece that has surrounded you or through your early days of entrepreneurship, you found something that you were passionate about, or the entrepreneurship somehow married with something you were passionate about, music and entertainment. I didn't do that. I was just like, I looked at everything from, I flew out to Scottsdale to look at Little Gym franchises, I looked at food franchises. I didn't have the capital to do any of the Taco Bell or anything. So for me, it became, what has the lowest barrier to entry that fits with what I can get into and can give me my own deal? That's what I'm going to do. The young entrepreneurs out there that might be listening right now, or better yet, and I'm sure that you saw this in corporate America, I saw it all the time, that man or woman that is 55, they're nearing retirement, and they've waited all these years to finally go do what they always wanted to do all along, which was to start their own little business, start an Etsy store, whatever the case may be. What would you say is most important? The desire to be an entrepreneur, or the desire to get paid, whether it's 20 grand a year or 200 grand a year, to do something that you're really excited and passionate about? Which one, or is there? I mean, what do you have a take on that?
So I think where we find true joy and contentment is by marrying what we're passionate with what we're good at. And if you can find that, then you'll never work a day in your life, right? Yeah. There are days that I have that I don't like, and most days I go home and more bad things happen that day than good things. Mm-hmm. But it's like playing golf. How many good shots do you have to hit in a round till you're like, well, I'm going to come back? Right? I got one birdie. Man, I knocked one drive way down there. I'm coming back. Mm-hmm. Well, you still shot way more than you wanted to shoot. But when you're doing something you're passionate about, and you're doing something that you're good at, that's where things really click. And the thing about entrepreneurship is people that set out to want to be entrepreneurs don't understand entrepreneurship, because it's what is the old adage? Entrepreneurship is the only job where people work 80 hours a week so they don't have to work 40 hours a week. That's right. It is the glamour, and I tell people this about being a CEO, the glamour and excitement and sexiness of being in charge, of being an entrepreneur fades quickly. Mm-hmm. And the reality is you just have to work really, really hard all the time. Yeah. And I don't believe that people know what hard work is as it relates to entrepreneurship if they've never done it. Yeah. And so if you aren't passionate about it and you aren't good at it, you are going to give up, because 90% of the people that do this don't work. It doesn't work. Like you have to be crazy to start your own company, because the odds are so against you. You would never bet on an entrepreneur odds like that, right? Now there's people that make a lot of money out of trying to bet on the right ones, the right horses, and the VCs do that, and hopefully some of them do it well. But to me, that's what's important. But I think what I tell people all the time is you can't underestimate the commitment it's going to take to do this. And they're like, oh yeah, no, I work hard. I get it, but you don't. Yeah. And that's why it's so time consuming. Mm-hmm. That's why it takes, some people would say, you have to choose, do you want to be rich and be successful and be an entrepreneur that's really good, or do you want to have a family? Yeah. I don't ascribe to that. Yeah. And if that's the weight balance that I have to choose, well, then I won't be rich. Right. I can still be an entrepreneur, but I won't be rich. The reality is, people ask me, what are my hobbies? Well, I hang out with my kids and I work. Yeah, but what do you do? Like on the weekends, what do you, I can't. So there's sacrifices in being an entrepreneur, but that you have to be committed to those, because the ability to go home, I've got a t-ball game today I have to go to that it starts at like 4, right? I get to leave whenever I want. Mm-hmm. I'll be up till 2 a.m. working. Like, you don't just get to have your cake and eat it too. It's a very, very different setup. So that's my sort of answer to that question, is I think it's way more important to find something that you're passionate about. I love franchises as entrepreneurial endeavors, because you're not having to start from zero. Right. And you have this learned knowledge around you. You have this resource center that can help support you. And it's a great way for you to be the master of your own domain and to help make decisions about be your own boss without having to fully risk not having the right resources around you to be successful. So I think a franchise is a great way to get in. And I think older people who have potentially by that time a little bit more money in their accounts than you did when you're 20 can afford to go out and try a franchise and have it not devastate the rest of their life if it doesn't work. And so I think franchisees are as much entrepreneurs as anybody else. I think small businesses are as much entrepreneurs as anybody else. I think that we can't highlight, Mark Zuckerberg because he built a fast-growing technology company as opposed to, Joe's Bar and Grill that has one location in Tyler, Texas.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I could not agree more. And I think that, we tend to, it's because we always hear about the outliers, right? We always hear about the Chris Sakas, so we always hear about the Zuckerbergs, the Peter Thiels. We hear about those guys, but you don't hear about that that guy. Well, great one. I'll mention, you say a barbecue joint in Tyler, Texas. Nick Pence is one of the single most successful entrepreneurs that I know personally. Probably want to have him on the Texas Titans podcast because he's Texas Monthly said he's got the best pork ribs in the state twice. And this is a guy that he works his tail off, but he has 100% of something absolutely phenomenal. It's all his. Mm-hmm. He is every bit the entrepreneur that any of these other guys are. So, all right. So, fast forward to you've had some wins, you've had some success, and I think that the Dallas Entrepreneur Center, the Dallas Innovation Alliance, and those sorts of things kind of take me to the road from successful entrepreneur into what I would consider that element, like I read in the bio, a social capitalist. First of all, for the listener, define what you consider a social capitalist to be, and when was it that you decided, okay, I've hit some triples, I've hit some home runs, and now it's time to be the coach and nurture and kind of do for the greater good. When did that happen, and what does that look like?
So social capitalist to me is a term that one of my friends created that I really like, which basically just means, look, I want to do good and make money. Mm-hmm. And I think capitalism is a great, instrument for that to happen. I don't think that it's without its challenges. I think that capitalism, creates an environment where some win and some lose, and I don't think that's a positive thing. But overall, the free market concept and the ability to come in and, what we call the American dream, or what was supposed to be the American dream, around building things and getting to benefit from your hard work, is good. I moved back to Dallas in 2008 from LA, where I'd done some work at a investment bank, and we were buying up, leveraging celebrities to build technologies and companies, and using them as investors, but also as brand ambassadors to make the companies work. And so I came back here, I took over a company, turned it around, and we exited it. And I kind of said, look, I just kind of want to live in Dallas forever. My parents are here, my in-laws are here, we have a house, we have a baby. Like, I've done enough things to realize that I don't think you have to live in Silicon Valley to build a successful business. I don't think you have to live in New York City to be a significant contributor on the world economy or in the social marketplace. So I'm going to be here, and if I'm going to be here, I want to do two things. I know I want to help make Dallas a better city because I live here, and I want to help entrepreneurs. Like you, I'd always mentored entrepreneurs. At that point was when SMU asked me to launch this entrepreneurship department. Not something I expected, but okay, sure, we'll do that. And then I launched I met the guy who would eventually become mayor, Mike Rawlings, and asked him to partner with me on this Mayor's Star Council. I felt like we really needed to create a leadership development organization that helped people develop correctly, think about the future of the city, and recognize that it was their responsibility at a young age. I also knew young people are arrogant punks, and if we don't teach them how to do this well, then they're going to make really bad, ignorant, arrogant decisions. So let's help them learn. Let's surround them with people, mentors. Let's help teach them about the city. And that was one of the things. I didn't know anything about the city I'd grown up in. I didn't know we had a weak mayor system. I didn't know how many city council members we'd had. I couldn't have told you anything about areas of the city or neighborhoods. So that was part of why we did that. What that did was it put me into a situation where I was doing two basically nonprofit things, not making any money doing them. And so I thought, well, if I start a for-profit company, these will fail, because I will always pick a for-profit endeavor over a nonprofit endeavor because they've got very different goals. One is maximizing shareholder value. The other one is creating impact. So I said, you know what? I'm just going to do nonprofit stuff for 5 years. What stuff that I've always wanted to do? If I had to remove the concept of profit, maximizing profit, building, exiting, making as much money as I could, if I could remove that off the table, what would I do? Well, at this time, we were working with Steve Case from AOL. He had this national nonprofit called Startup America Partnership. And I was looking around the country, and I said, there's not anything in Texas that's like these entrepreneur centers that were brand new. What if we just tried that? So we went out, we built it, we tried it, we got it going. It ended up working, and I was able to raise the money to pay my salary, to cover my bills. And then through that, I sort of decided I wanted to build the Dallas Innovation Alliance. I had this hypothesis that Dallas was top 5 or 6 most entrepreneurial and innovative areas in the country. I also believed that no one outside of Dallas knew nor cared. So how was I going to bring the eyes of the world on Dallas to highlight what was going on here, to share the data and statistics that we have that are 100% defensible? The goal was we need to build something innovative like a smart cities project that will help bring the eyes of the world on Dallas and help the city prepare to make good long-term decisions. And 2, in order to do that, we want to highlight these entrepreneurs, innovators. We got to go find them.
Right.
So the deck found and aggregated entrepreneurs and then taught aspiring entrepreneurs how to build companies, right? To your point earlier, what did we wish we would have had growing up? Somebody to tell us what we should and shouldn't do. That's what the deck did, and then the Dallas Innovation Alliance creating that strategic partner opportunity with the city to grow. And so I just dedicated myself for 5 years. The last thing I did was I launched a nonprofit, national nonprofit with some friends that was an extension of what Steve had done at Startup America Partnership, which really was about bringing people together that did what I did for entrepreneurs, build ecosystems. And so now there's a national nonprofit with called the Startup Champions Network with representatives in 49 states and Puerto Rico that all are working together to help be more effective in developing communities and ecosystems for entrepreneurs to be successful. And so after 5 years, at 4 years, I started looking for my replacement at the deck, and I started to build my exit strategy. And so that exit strategy, stopped doing that full time in June or July of last year, and then over the course of the last 6 or 8 months have been focusing on helping put those organizations in good places, helping them raise money, helping them develop new strategic plans, helping bring in new leadership, helping bring in new board members, and develop a plan where it doesn't rely on me to be successful anymore. And that has brought us to where we are today. But I just sort of made the commitment, 5 years, I'm going to do this, and I won't take any other opportunities that come my way.
Well, it's impressive, and the Dallas community should be very grateful and has benefited. For you to seriously take that intellectual capital and pour it into the city. And one of the things I'd like for you to touch on a little bit, because we've kind of touched on it a few times throughout the conversation, so that listeners understand what the whole smart cities, intelligent cities concept is, as we look at sustainability, as we look at more efficiency from an energy standpoint. Kind of talk through what it is and why. I mean, the reasons for its importance are almost obvious, but kind of talk through that.
Yeah, what does it mean? So everybody has a different definition for smart cities, but the way I looked at it and got interested in was this. We were looking at some data that basically showed the population growth inside metropolitan areas by 2050 will exceed the infrastructure's capacity to hold it. Right. We built these cities with the idea that there would be a certain number of people. We had no idea that we would exceed that, or didn't think about it at the time. So we have 2 options. We can either A, send everybody to go live in the suburbs, and there's nothing wrong with living in suburbs, but if you want to live in a downtown metropolitan area, you should be able to do it. So we can either send people out there, or we can make their current infrastructure more efficient. And so looking at, and when I think of the layman's definition of smart cities, is I think of how do we use technology, data, and infrastructure to create efficiencies, cost savings, and new revenue opportunities for cities. And so that's what we set out to do. And what we told the mayor of Dallas was, look, this is not a fork in the road where the city can say, oh, yeah, smart cities, we're going to do that, or no, that's not really a part of our future roadmap. We said it's a dead end you're going to run into at some point. If you do this now, we'll be able to get you a 5 to 7 year head start over most of the other organizations. And by the way, we're a public-private partnership nonprofit. We don't have the same rules that you as a city do. We don't have procurement laws about RFPs and timelines and processes. We just went out and said, this is what we want to build. This is who we want to build it. We're going to pay for it. City, are you cool with that? Mm-hmm. And they said, fortunately, they had the leadership inside of City Hall to see this as an opportunity, not a threat. And as a result, we were able to build the fastest to market smart cities project in the world, and with one of the most robust pilots, having 9 different projects that we were running at one time over the course of a year. And we just learned a ton too, right? It's still early in that space. There's few people that actually have built and implemented a full plan, and like we've had the opportunity to do. But we're seeing more and more how this really creates game-changing opportunities for cities, which in the end is about the individual citizen. So if you're not, as a city, you're not focusing on creating a better place to work, live, and play for your citizens, you're going to see people leave. And we know that is happening because Dallas, Fort Worth, just became the 4th largest metro in the country, behind LA, New York, and Chicago. And we got 1 million people to move here over the last 8 years, and guess where they're coming from? The other 3 largest metro areas, right? So if we're not taking advantage of and building an environment and a place where those people want to be, we won't be 3, we won't be 2, we won't be 1. We'll just drop down further. And so I think when I look at what this region needs to be successful in the future, if you were to say, what's the future rely upon? It relies upon a bunch of different things. I mean, this is a great environment to build businesses. It's a great cost of living. There's all kinds of wonderful things to do here in the arts and public transportation, all the things. But in the end, in my mind, it comes down to 2 things. It comes down to our focus on innovation, not technological innovation, but innovation. How are we getting better at everything that we do?
Right.
And 2, a commitment to equity. One of the things that Dallas and the region, but Dallas especially, has done really bad is value people equally and give people equal opportunity and recognize that we are a city of all kinds of different people. And if we do not put a priority around that equity, when we get to being at the main stage, Broadway, standing in front of the world, people that are different, that don't look like us, that are diverse, aren't going to want to be here. And so we will always be a good international city, but we will never be a great international city until we become a city that anybody feels like they want to live in. And so those 2 things to me are really what the future's about. It's what I do through the DIA, it's what I do through the Mayor Star Council, it's what we do in a lot of the stuff that we are trying to implement in the city, is recognizing what steps we need to take, what questions we need to ask, what solutions we need to create to address realizing the ultimate potential that we have as a city.
Right. Well, I want to tell you that in order to pay homage to our beloved Dallas, our mutual friend Shalissa Perry from downtown Dallas, put me up with these sweet Dallas Skyline socks.
I got a pair of those puppies.
Yeah, that I wish that our listeners could see. They are fantastic. They make my feet feel global and entrepreneurial. So they're fantastic. But one of the things too that I would say about Dallas in particular, you touched on it, because Houston it's the most diverse city. I mean, by a mile. But Dallas, I do think it's become so much more global in nature. And with all, I say this a lot to, again, talking to young people, because it's really easy to get jaded and cynical about with the division that we have, from the political standpoint, all that. But really, what an amazing time to be alive. It is incredible from an innovative standpoint, from the things that we're able to do that we weren't able to do just 10 years ago. I mean, I wouldn't be able to do this podcast 10 years ago. This was a passion project like we talked about earlier. I'm starting a media company because I think it'll be fun. And I'm going to have patience. I don't care if it takes 3 years to get to 1 million downloads. I'm going to get to 1 million downloads. I'm going to talk to, Trey Bowles and all these other fascinating people, because it helps to scratch the itch I have, which is I want to know what you know. I want to learn more. And so there's never been a better opportunity for that. I tell my daughters all the time, you guys are alive at a remarkable time. And then you bring that to, you're in Texas. I mean, that entrepreneurial spirit, that spirit of just, hey, if you believe it, like a Dallasite, Mary Kay Ash once said, if you can believe it, if you believe it, you can achieve it. I think that's what this is about. So we've talked a little bit about what you would say to the young entrepreneur, and even that kind of retiree, like, hey, to help hedge your bets. Maybe you go into a franchising or something to that effect where you're not having to completely learn from scratch. Those who are in the position that, and you know, I'm by the way, Tyler has the Tyler Innovation Pipeline, and I'm seeing these sorts of, you know, incubators and supporters of entrepreneurs and makers, you know, pop up throughout the state. It's very encouraging. So, what would you say to entrepreneurs, local business owners that have just they're in their lane, they're making a good living, kids are off to school, they just don't know how to shape their community? I mean, they look around and they see Dallas and they go, my goodness, you know, it's a major metropolitan area, one of the largest cities in the country. How do I get involved? What would you tell that individual?
Well, I tell them to take a assessment of the landscape. What's going on right now? What's happening today that you can plug into and participate in, right? You don't want to start something new if you don't have to. And especially people that are busy and have commitments and have things that they're responsible for. You know, when you're young, you have tons of time and no money. When you're older, you got lots of responsibilities, but not as much time. So find things that are happening, figure out how you can get involved, and then offer a way to help.
Yeah. And
for a lot of people, that's, well, I've been an attorney for 20 years. Mm-hmm. Great. Well, come help a young company figure out what legal structure they should have, right? Yeah. Come help somebody think through founder's docs so they can create almost inevitable split that's going to happen before it happens, right? Figure out what your role is in that ecosystem and begin to connect. And then what tends to happen, because entrepreneurs and innovators are curious, fun people, is you get in, they're welcoming, and then you tell them what kind of things you know how to do, and they just start connecting you. Right? It's like any industry, no matter how big it is, it's small. Mm-hmm. And so if you come into a community and you find the entrepreneurial stuff that's happening there, it's going to be very quick, but for you to integrate and engage and give back. And if you're willing to give back, that's hugely valuable. And then at that point, if there's something that really scratches an itch that doesn't exist, then you can look at going in and building something new. Right. But remember, you're going to build something new that doesn't pay you much money and takes an enormous amount of your time. So make sure you really want to do it. Whereas you could come and go from an organization that you didn't start. Yeah. And I think that's a great way to engage. Look at other models across the country. Find programs and organizations that are doing things that you really admire. Have you had a startup weekend in your city? Do you have 1 Million Cups, organizations? What kind of meetups exist around the country that are hugely valuable? That's the kind of things what I do. My brilliant idea on innovation is go out and find what everybody's doing really well and steal it, and then change whatever I need to. Because why would you recreate the wheel? There's people way smarter, way more successful that have paved this way and learned and done things that you can learn from. As opposed to trying to start or recreate the wheel in your community.
That's brilliant. It reminds me, I wish so badly I could remember where I just recently read where a guy was talking about, it's the suitcase with the wheels is what he used as an example. He refused for years to use a suitcase with wheels on it because he just thought almost like that was cheating. Right. He's like, no, I want this nice leather, garment bag that's hard to maneuver, it's heavier than it has to be, until finally he's like, that's stupid. I'm going to use the Toomey or whatever with the wheels on it. And again, going back to that ego thing, man, it took me forever to get to that point. It's like, no, I'm not going to ask anybody to do that. I'm going to do it because, or I'm not going to go try to take a template.
Right.
And Microsoft templates are awesome. Mm-hmm. And I am not ashamed to admit I will take one of those and doctor it up and throw logos on it. So, absolutely. All right, well, Trey, I know your time is extremely valuable. We're almost to the hour point, but here's what I want to do, and you're the first guest I've done this with, and I want to try to make this a regular deal and I think it really fits well with any of the folks I'm going to have on the podcast. So, I'm not sure if you've ever read The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Most everybody like us has.
Right.
And if you'll remember, there's that, and I don't remember which chapter, where Covey says, okay, you're standing outside a church, and all of a sudden you hear the organs playing. You walk in, you realize it's a somber environment. It's a funeral. You walk up, and you realize you're in the casket. You are at your own funeral. Trey, what do you want? We talked about it. It's how we started. There's one. Our bios, right? Our professional bios are kind of like our professional eulogies.
Right.
It's kind of a morbid thought, but it's kind of what they are, right? So at this point in your career, you still got a lot of runway left. You're 42 years old. What do you want said about you? What do you want to achieve? Not just professionally, but as just a human being. When it's all said and done, what are you after at this point?
So I learned at a young age that my goal at 22 when I was at Morpheus was I wanted to be a millionaire by the time I was 30. Mm-hmm. And I learned a couple of things. One, I learned, you can't control an exit. Mm-hmm. You can only control your contribution to the process. Mm-hmm. And B, $1 million is not enough money to live off for the rest of your life. Yeah. So I just changed the way I viewed success. And it was more about, I want to do what I love, mm-hmm. and I want to be able to provide for myself or my family as a result. Mm-hmm. I think that I could do a lot of things in my life that would create generational change and impact and build large organizations or build leadership development things that could affect people way into the future. In 50 years, nobody's going to remember who I am. Most likely, right? So what I really care is that I loved my wife well, that I loved and spent time with my family, mm-hmm. and made them feel as though they were the, a top priority, mm-hmm. And that I did what I loved, and then I went home. That's what I want. Other than that, I'm not bothered with. I think legacy for me is what my kids are going to do, yep. What they're going to become. What integrity I teach them, what lessons, how did they feel about the way, that's my responsibility on this earth is to my wife and my family. Yeah. So I just want to knock that out of the park. Yeah. And there's nobody I've met, I've spent time with some affluent people, there's nobody that I've met in the twilight of their life said, gosh, I just wish I would have worked more. Right. I just wish I would have sold one more company. Right. I just wish I would have accomplished this. They all say, don't be an idiot, spend time with your family. Yeah. Because at the end, when you're on your way out, no matter what happens when you die, one thing is clear, nothing is going with you. That's right. There's no suitcase, yeah. Right? And so that's something, and at 42, I want to learn from people that are 82, 72, mm-hmm. 62, and 52, to say, look, the same thing you'd say to a 20-year-old, if you could see from my perspective, mm-hmm. your life, you would make these decisions. Yeah. And they don't listen. Right. Maybe they listen. What I want to do is I want to listen to the people that are looking at me and saying, let me tell you what you need to know about what will make you happy at the end of your life. That's what I want to be on my eulogy or epitaph or whatever.
I think that's fantastic. Trey, thank you so much. Where can people find you on social media?
At Trey Bowles, pretty simple, on Instagram, Twitter, on LinkedIn under Trey Bowles, and fortunately there's not that many people called Trey Bowles, so I got all the handles I needed. Right.
And if someone they've got a burning desire, they're a maker, they've invented the next unicorn of a widget or something to that effect, they want to get involved in the deck or the Dallas Innovation Alliance, what do they do?
The DEC's website is thedec.co, and the Dallas Innovation Alliance is dallasinnovationalliance.com.
Simple enough. Trey, I cannot express to you how grateful I am for you doing this. It's been fun, man. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the time.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that interview with Trey Bowles. Thank you so very much for listening to the Texas Titans podcast. I am so grateful. If you would please subscribe to the podcast and share it and tell friends about it. And please, if you have time, go out and write a review on iTunes. That is the way we move up in the rankings. And by the way, if you know of anyone that I should reach out to that you've been wanting to hear from, I don't care if you know them or not. If it's somebody that you think is worthy of the title of Texas Titan, let me know. I know a lot of good good folks. I've got a lot of great interviews lined up, but I want to hear from you, and I want to know who you want me to reach out to and who you'd like me to bring to you, the audience of the Texas Titans podcast. You can do that by emailing me at jason@textitans.com. That's jason@titans.com. I would really appreciate it. Again, thanks for listening. Please follow me on Twitter at JasonWrightTX. You can also follow me on Insta at JasonWrightNow, and I'd appreciate it if you did that. Facebook, Jason Wright as well. Just please, please, please do everything you can to push the podcast, subscribe, review us, whatever you can do. And I'm going to do my part by continuing to try to bring you great interviews and great content. Thank you so much. Go out and crush it. Thanks.